All right. All right. Welcome. Good afternoon. Happy Friday to everybody. Happy special Friday. This is pre-spring break Friday. So even a more awesome Friday afternoon. So welcome to Chi Sigma Iota's Omega Chapter Alumni Panel Discussion and Meeting. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking time out of your Friday afternoon and hanging out a little bit with us. So as always, standard protocol in any of these new normal WebEx meetings is to talk a little bit about etiquette when it comes to WebEx. I know one person mentioned this is their first WebEx experience, so you're a WebEx noob, but they all work about the same. WebEx is basically Wright State's current Zoom iteration. So the big deals, as always, is make sure if you're not speaking, make sure you mute yourself and turn your video off unless you are one of the panelists. We would like to see your face. Well, also, if you have any questions or any issues early on in the meeting, if you have anything you want to share, you can always use the chat box. And the chat box icon is down at the bottom. Well, it can be either bottom or top, depending on your screen. Click on the little chat bubble and feel free to type in. So my name is Dr. Josh Francis. I am one of the co-faculty advisors along with Dr. Neelan Brown, who recently took on the new role of chair of the department. So she no longer has time for us little peons anymore. I'm just kidding. She's doing a wonderful job, and we're really happy to have her as our new leader, replacing Dr. Fortson. For many of you who haven't had any news, of some of you alum who haven't had any news about the program, Dr. Fortson retired in June or July, and Dr. Neelan Brown became chair more recently than not. So anyway, I'm a full-time faculty member in the clinical mental health counseling program. This has really been an interesting, fascinating, and amazing time to be in the counseling field. The COVID-19 pandemic has sort of catapulted the importance of mental health even further into the mainstream of public health. And we've been kind of creeping along over the last decade and gaining recognition. But anytime I talk about COVID-19, I have to try to spin it to where we can see the silver linings. And the silver linings are, one of the big silver linings is, I think it's making us all uber aware of the importance of mental health and how, although public health should be a priority, we can't forget mental health. And I've been kind of increasingly, not bitter or angry, but just trying to advocate for that, because finally we're starting to get a lot of the data that comes down with the mental health impact from COVID-19, and how I just want to be like, yes, I mean, what did we think was going to happen? So to the point to where I think, unfortunately, COVID is creating a mental health legacy that even if hopefully COVID's impact will not, as a virus, won't last much longer, unfortunately, I think the mental health impact is guaranteed to last longer than the virus itself. So thankfully, there will be all of you, trained, competent, and altruistic helpers who will do all we can to minimize the impact of this legacy that COVID has on our mental health of our children, our students, our clients, and our families. So thankfully, we have us, you all, and continue to train people to come into the field and do good work. So today we're going to hear from some of the alumni of our counseling program who are doing the work, and we're very blessed to benefit from their expertise, their knowledge, their experience, and hopefully we see the product of what many of you who are students right now, we see the product of what will come from this training. So I want to offer sincere thanks to our practicing alumni, some of you who are here today on our panel, and our future practicing alumni and members of Chi Sigma Iota Omega who can benefit from the experiences and knowledge of our program, graduates, and who are out there to make a difference in the mental health of our communities. So we also find ourselves at an interesting time in the history of Wright State University's Omega Chapter of CSI, marking the 35th anniversary of our chapter. So we've been here a long time, and I hope to be part of this for, hopefully we're here at least another 35 years. So to provide a little history of our chapter, I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Dr. Donna Tromsky-Klingshirn. Dr. Tromsky-Klingshirn is an associate professor in the clinical mental health counseling program and is, I think, the longest tenured professor teaching in our department. She's also a longstanding member and supporter of Chi Sigma Iota Omega Chapter and is a past faculty advisor. There's a scene in one of my favorite movies, Lord of the Rings, so I'm one of those nerds, where Gandalf is looking for advice and says, I must see the head of my order. He is both wise and powerful. Though Dr. Tromsky-Klingshirn is not the official head of our order, many times over the past several years I've had a similar phrase. I need to speak to Dr. Tromsky-Klingshirn, Donna, because she is both wise and powerful. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to the wise and powerful Dr. Tromsky-Klingshirn to share a little bit more information about the Omega Chapter of Chi Sigma Iota at Wright State on this anniversary.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Francis. And, you know, I know it's spring break and you don't have to suck up to me this year, though. Okay.
Can't hurt anything, right?
Well, I'd first like to thank Bridget and Rebecca and all the executive committee for organizing this. Wow. And, you know, Bridget's note or email to all the Omega Chapter Chi Sigma Iota members was really compelling. And she sent it out yesterday, Thursday at 7 in the morning. This is a very exciting day for our Omega Chapter at Wright State. 35 years ago today, Omega Chapter was chartered, and we feel that is a huge reason to celebrate. To commemorate this big day, our Chi Sigma Iota Executive Board has decided to host an essay contest. Winner will receive 1 year paid dues. All right. Well, and the topic for the contest: how has the counseling field changed in the last 35 years, and what do you think it will look like 35 years from now? Well, for my first thought was, so does it give people who are like older than 50 and who have been in the field like longer than 20 years a slight advantage over those who are like recently graduated in their 20s? Okay. I don't know. Bridget, did you think about that? I thought I did. And I thought, yeah. So if any of you alum are like, remember, you know, this is our 53rd year as a department. Any of you alum graduated in the late 60s or early 70s by any chance? You can chat in your, if you have. In looking at the list of the, I'm thinking, anybody from the 80s at all? Yeah. You can chat in if you want. Well, you know, so I don't know, Bridget. Thank you. If you you know, so I think it might give a slight advantage to people who are a little bit, at least to answer, you know, the total question. But I thought that was a very nice tribute to commemorate our 35th anniversary of the Omega Chapter. The Omega Chapter was the 19th chapter out of today over 400 chapters to be chartered. And I don't, I was going to try to do screen share, but not today. I didn't want to try to experiment with a lot of that. But anyway, I went in and got hanging up. I don't know if you can see it. real well, but I took a picture with my phone when I was in the office last, of the official charter that hangs on the back wall of our office in Allen Hall and the annex. So it reads, Chi Sigma Iota, Counseling, Academic, and Professional Honor Society International. Be it known that Omega Chapter at Wright State University has met all requirements for affiliation and is this day granted a charter of chapter membership in the International Honor Society. This chapter and all its members shall observe the duties and responsibilities and enjoy the rights and privileges which now or may heretofore be accorded by the bylaws of Chi Sigma Iota Incorporated. Given this 25th day of February 1986, and it's undersigned Jane Myers, National President, and Tom Sweeney, Executive Director. So it's official in 1986, along with accreditation and credentialing, meaning licenses and certifications you all now enjoy. That was all happening in the 80s. This was all happening within a year or two of each other. Our KCREP and CORE accreditations for our programs, those of you who graduated in rehab had CORE accreditation, and those who with community, clinical mental health counseling, or school counseling all had KCREP accreditation. So with that, it was a very exciting time to be a student back in the 80s, and with all these things happening that made our profession official as an official discipline and an official profession. So we all reap the benefit of having those days, and as I asked President Bridget for the official numbers, Chi Sigma Iota, the Omega Chapter, being chartered in 1986, has inducted 664 members since. We've had our induction ceremonies and nice events like this. And in fact, for our 20th anniversary back in 2006, I had the pleasure of being chapter faculty advisor at that time, and Dr. Thomas Sweeney, who had come to deliver this charter to Dr. Gregory Bernhardt, who was dean of, or who became dean, but was chair of the department at that time. We were able to invite him to the 20th anniversary, and he gave us a thumbs up, and the students were thrilled at that time. So we hope that the chapter lives long and prospers and continues to have every bit of alumni events and networking that continues to happen today. And what mostly makes it work is a dedicated executive board and students who want to join. So we're doing all the right things, and I appreciate seeing familiar faces again, and have a great alumni panel. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Chomsky-Klingshern. It always takes a while for my video to come up, so you may not see me again. So I'm going to now turn things over to Rebecca Orr, who is an officer on the executive committee of our CSI chapter, to facilitate the remainder of today's panel discussion. So you are in good hands, Rebecca. All yours.
Thank you, Dr. Francis, and thank you so much, Dr. Chomsky-Klingshern, for highlighting our milestone this year. As treasurer of the Omega Chapter for 2020 to 2021, it has been a really big emphasis for our chapter this year to stay connected with one another. As Dr. Francis was mentioning at the beginning, this has been quite a year. So I want to first just really thank the alumni that are here today to share some wisdom and some of their experience, because I know a lot of us are in the final year of our graduate program, and not only are we juggling classes and internship and telehealth, whatever that looks like, we're also having to navigate licensure and getting a job and, life post grad school. So I'm really excited to be hearing from you guys today. We'll get started. I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves. I have a little slide here with your name on it. So we'll just go through the panelists and let me pull it up. And if you guys could just share what year you graduated, where you're at now, and what your licensure is, and feel free to share a little something about yourself as well. I would love that. So we can start with Tasha if you are ready.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Tasha Wilson. I graduated in spring of 2019 from the school counseling program. So I have a professional pupil services license in school counseling through the state of Ohio. Currently, I am working as a high school counselor at the Dayton Regional STEM School. It's my second year. So it's been fun adjusting. I really didn't get to finish a full year, a full normal year before COVID hit. So it's been a really interesting time trying to deal with all of that. So something fun about myself, my favorite hobby, I guess my main hobby, is knitting. And it was a huge part of my self-care plan and just like a way for me to relieve stress from work and just general life.
Thank you so much, Tasha. Jolene, how are ya?
I'm good. How are you guys? So, I'm Jolene. This is my fourth year as a school counselor. So I graduated in 2017. So I had pre-COVID and then COVID. So this past couple school years has been rough. I will say that. I guess fun fact, I was president of Chi Sigma Iota when I was at Wright State. And then, let's see, I recently got 2 puppies. So that's a fun fact.
Busy. I just got a puppy too, so I feel ya. What school are you at?
I am at Edwin Joel Brown Middle School in Dayton. So, if you're familiar with Dayton, I'm kind of off of Main Street. So it's kind of on down. But I've been with Dayton Public Schools for 3 years. They're my second district I've worked at.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. And then representing addictions counseling, Alan, I'm not sure, did you graduate when it was technically rehabilitation with chemical dependency?
Yes, I was, I think, the only person in my program at that time. Rehabilitation counseling with a concentration in chemical dependency. I finished the program in spring of 2017. I'm currently working as a behavioral health therapist at Goodwill Easter Seals, Miami Valley. We're located at 660 South Main Street and just south of downtown Dayton, just north of the hospital. That's the nature of my job. I work a lot with dual diagnosis, mental health, and substance use. My licenses right now, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I like to think I'm pretty close to the independent licensure there. I just got to take the exam and all that fun stuff. But in addition to that, I'm a licensed independent chemical dependency counselor. And I have the certification, certified rehabilitation counselor, which was a part of the rehab counseling program. I'm trying to think something fun about me. I also have my go-to, I'm a triplet. So if you happen to If you're in the Cleveland Heights area and see someone that looks kind of like me that works as a teacher, that's probably my brother. Likewise, if you're in the Westchester area securing a home loan, that working with some bank person that looks kind of like me too, that's probably also my brother. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And then our clinical mental health counseling alumni, we have Kathy, who is a special person for me because she's my supervisor. Kathy?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Kathy Bean. I graduated in 2009, so I feel like the old lady on the panel. And I did clinical mental health counseling. I'm an LPCC. I also have my supervision designation. I'm currently working at Empower Psychology and Wellness. We were formerly Klein and Associates, which was a really large private practice in Kettering. We've changed names and we have actually moved. So we're out closer towards the Dayton Mall now. And something interesting about me, I have two kittens that are closing up on 1 year old each. So yeah, that's fun. Thank you.
Last but certainly not least, Jenna.
Hi guys, my name is Jenna Van Houten and I graduated from the clinical mental health counseling program in December of 2019. So I am a LPC, licensed professional counselor. I currently work in community mental health at South Community, which is located in Moraine, like on the Moraine-Kettering border. Specifically, I work at the Youth Positive Health Day Treatment Program. So I work with the SED kids in an inpatient type setting. I worked there for about 2 months before COVID hit, so it has been a very interesting first year of practice for me. Doing telehealth day treatment has definitely been something of a learning experience, I would say. Fun fact about me is that, let's see, I worked in the office as well. I was a graduate assistant with Darian and Rebecca my last semester, and I am an avid karaoke singer, and I desperately miss that from pre-pandemic times.
Man, days of karaoke, they feel so long ago.
That'll be our next alumni panel.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you guys again. I know I've said it a million times, but I think a lot of us right now, as we're headed into the field, whether we're already in practicum and internship or we're about to be, the whole concept of how do I get a job after I graduate? I know that some kind of transition from practicum and internship and stay at that same site. So I was wondering if maybe someone from each program could share how they landed their job and whether they just kind of stayed in their same site from internship and what that looked like, or if they had to go through the process of applying. So either Tasha or Jolene, do you have any insight from a school counseling perspective?
I mean, I can talk about kind of through both districts, if that makes it a little easier.
Yeah.
So everything's online, obviously, but it really depends on the area that you plan to work. So if you're in the Dayton area, everything is online through the Dayton Consortium. So you would create an account. It has all of the Dayton area school districts, and your one profile can be sent to all the districts so they can view it. And then you'll see every time there's an opening in your area. But then there's also, so if you're looking in like the Columbus area, like each main city has their own kind of application. So like Columbus City Schools has their whole own system. And then same thing for like Clark County has their kind of area as well, and just different things. So it really depends what area you want to apply, and then just really looking in that county to kind of see what consortium they use. But so my first job I got on was in Springfield. It was Clark Shawnee Schools. And I had applied through the consortium, went through that process. You'll see a lot of openings and you'll apply. So my first year I had like 30, I think almost like 30 interviews. So I applied almost everywhere in Ohio and it was unreal. So I don't advise going to that many interviews. That's way too much, guys, way too much. But my biggest advice is like not to just take like the first job that kind of comes to you. Because I was freaking out. I wasn't getting a job or anything. And then I was accepted, offered a job, and they wanted me to accept it on site. And they didn't want to give me time to think about it. That should have been like red flag. But I was like, okay, I mean, it seems like I like it. Why not? And then I got another offer. And I had felt like I was already locked in. So I didn't realize you have until I think like June 10th is the like Ohio deadline to change your mind or switch locations. So it's very important to really consider all of your offers and don't just jump at the first one, because that was my mistake.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. Alan, how was your experience in the chemical dependency world? Did you stay at the same internship site and carry on, or did you go through the application process?
So I like to think that my process was what I think is more traditional as far as hitting up those job search sites. I know I did my internship with Public Health 8 Montgomery County through their addiction services program. And I think I started applying for jobs, I think at the start of my last semester. And I remember that was a little bit of a challenge, was, interviewing in a lot of different places and having to explain that I'm not yet licensed yet. I'm still a student, but I'll be done here in, here in May. And then my license hopefully will be conferred soon. So that was an interesting process there. And for the most part, sites were willing to wait. They were like, hey, everything looks pretty good. We'll wait for you. So I remember doing about maybe half of my internship at Public Health when I applied for a job at Miami Valley Hospital. And it turns out that I got that job. And one of the conditions of me accepting that job was that I needed to intern there. And so then I had to discuss that with my supervisor with addiction services at Public Health. And thankfully, she was very supportive of me. She allowed me to do that. So in other words, I left that internship and started another internship. And then after that, I was working for the hospital for, I think about 2 years after that. And I love that job. It was an intensive outpatient program. Working through the hospital was I loved it. It was cool getting to go to the main valley, to the campus, and, get in touch with the psychiatrist and everything. I love that program. I'd say the biggest thing that I would say, or rather the biggest piece of advice I would give for, applying for jobs, and I don't know if everyone else feels the same way. When I was applying, I found so many jobs that mandated 3 to 5 years of work experience. And it made me wonder, how does anyone get a job, starting out? Logically, I don't think that's possible. So I don't know if it's considered a white lie. I would always hit yes, that I have that experience. And then once you get to the interview, I would kind of get in a position of explaining, again, I'm a student. Here's what I can do. And like I said, for the hospital, I think it was a pretty cool experience. I remember all my coworkers had at least, 20 years of experience. And I remember them telling me they brought me in because I was young and brought that, I guess, quote unquote, youthful energy. And they also wanted me to help them with technology. So I guess that was a plus. But yeah, like I said, that's my biggest thing was start applying early, explain your situation, and don't let those little, must have 3 to 5 years experience kind of get in the way. But, same thing with what Jolene said, be selective with your offers. The thing that I learned, at least in my field, and I don't think this is a good thing, that when I graduated, unfortunately, in the addictions counseling field, business was booming. And again, that's not a good thing. But at the same time, that led to a lot of open job opportunities. So I think that was the biggest thing for me.
Awesome, thank you. And then the clinical mental health, Jenna, I would love to hear your experience. And then Kathy, as a supervisor, I would love to hear from you what you look for when you get internship applications and things like that. So Jenna, what was your experience like with your first job?
So I was somebody who ended up getting hired on to the site that I completed my practicum and internship at. So when I was placed at YPH, I was told, this is a very small, tight-knit team. There's not a lot of turnover. So I was not anticipating to get hired there, but then in the course of my internship, there were some positions that opened up from, clinicians that had left and gone to other areas. So I got fortunate in that way, and I did have to still, wait until I got my licensure, fill out a formal application. They did not make me do a team interview because I had been working there with the team for a year at that point, and we do a lot of group therapy there, so a lot of them had kind of seen my style. But the way that YPH works, they all kind of get together and decide if they think that clinician will be a good fit. So I felt very fortunate to be given that opportunity. And, the agency I worked for, South Community, was also very supportive in allowing me to look at other positions. So even though I was pretty sure I wanted to stay at YPH, I did, look at all the job posting sites, kind of see what else was out there. I would say my biggest advice as a newbie clinician would be, don't be afraid to set those professional boundaries. Like, as a younger, inexperienced clinician going into the workplace, it was kind of scary to negotiate salary and say, this is what I want, this is what I'm comfortable with, this is what I'm not comfortable with. Because not at my site per se, but I've also had friends that have recently graduated and been given more responsibility than they're comfortable for. Kind of like Alan touched on, the mental health field is kind of a booming industry. There's a lot of positions open, and I wouldn't say that it's rare to see a new clinician being put into a role that might require a little more experience. So don't be afraid to kind of stand up for yourself, stand up for those professional boundaries, advocate for yourself, because I think you'll be surprised at what you find.
Thank you. Kathy, what are your thoughts as far as, as we create our resumes and as we're reaching out to potential employers, what's your advice?
So I'm at a private practice. We don't have a formal application. Most of the time what happens is we get someone who reaches out through email or sends or faxes us their resume. When we're looking at the resumes, I think the thing that we look for probably the most is, what do you want to do? What are you interested in doing? So specify whether you have experience in that or not. And I would say, don't go for the generalities. If you just say oh, I just love, ADHD in kids, that's awesome. We have a need for that. But, show us that you want to do something else. Show us that you are interested in learning some other techniques, or maybe that you're open to cases down the road that other people might shy away from. So I would say that's my biggest piece of advice is personally, what are you interested in? What do you like to do?
Awesome. So be specific. I like it. Great. Tasha, I wanted to ask you, we had a few questions come in. I sent a email out ahead of time to some CSI members about what, do you have any specific questions? And there were a lot of school counseling ones that really asked about the difference between a guidance counselor and a school counselor and what that looks like as far as being accepted in your school or from parents or from the school board, of those boundaries between school counseling and guidance counseling. Could you talk to me a little bit about your experience?
Absolutely. So I have actually kind of experienced both aspects, so guidance counselor model and school counselor model. My internship site was very much guidance counselor. And what that really means is focus on academic and career pretty much exclusively, not a lot of mental health or social emotional work involved. The person I interned with, she was great at what she did for academic and college, but she didn't have a lot of day-to-day interaction and sessions with students about social emotional topics. So it was very interesting when I went into the job market looking for a position, because like Jolene was saying, the descriptions that they post, you can really tell a lot for school counseling positions about what kind of position it's going to be, especially in high school setting. Like they're very specific. And so there were a lot of them that I saw and I was like, that looks like a guidance counselor position because they don't even mention mental health at all in the description, versus like where the school that I ended up in, which is very much aligned with ASCA's model. So that was one of the best perks for me. And most of the conversations that I had during my interview with them was about mental health issues and social emotional issues. So I knew that that was going to be something I could actually deep dive into at that school. But yeah, there is definitely a perception from parents, from students, just people in general about what a guidance counselor looks like. And we're not portrayed usually very well in movies and TV. It's kind of like, oh, I have to go to the counselor, you know, like I'm in trouble or yeah. So there's definitely a perception there. There's a lot of advocacy work that you have to do within your school to put out kind of an image of what a school counselor is and explaining to kids and parents that we are there for everything, not just for academic and career focused topics. So it's been a challenge. But on my side, I have a great supervisor who actually is a former school counselor. So she is very much a proponent of our program and has helped kind of make that transition over to a school counselor model at our school.
Jolene, your experience, you've had two different counties that you've worked for. How have they kind of embraced your role in those environments?
Well, so I've spoke to Dr. Nealand and Dr. Hill and Dr. Johnson and all them numerous times about my first experience. It was very traumatic. It was like we were a middle school at a high school, so you kind of have that more guidance kind of a role is what you would think. But my supervisor really, my admin just didn't believe in counseling. So like she didn't think, you can't pull kids from class. Like it just really almost wanted like a sub kind of a thing, So it was like she expected me to do so much academic career stuff, but I wasn't ever allowed to see kids. So I couldn't wait for my first school year to be over. So, and then but on the other hand though, I learned early, like, this is not what I think a school counselor is. This is not who I am. I'm very student focused. So I think if they don't focus on the social emotional health, you're not going to get the grades. Like they go hand in hand. So when I started looking my second year in all of my interviews, I really ask more questions of them, which don't be afraid to do that. So I asked them, like, what do you feel like a counselor's role should be? Like, what do you think about mental health and like the issues that need to be addressed? School counselor at where I ended up at Dayton Public Schools. They had never had middle school counselors before. So it was kind of perfect timing because I knew what I wanted to be as a counselor. And then I really got to develop my entire programming. So, the ASCA model talks about like your school programming models and all this kind of stuff, school-wide programming and making sure you're covering all the domains. So I really got to create and implement all of that. So for me, I think some of the older, I don't want to say older buildings, but that are more set in their ways, they do think of more of a guidance, vocational kind of a role. Whereas it's more modern now that we're getting into, like, we're school counselors, we're not really guidance counselors. Like, there's so much more to students than counseling than just like college readiness. So that's kind of experience.
Awesome. Thank you. And I would love to hear from Alan. I think as an addiction counselor or a clinical mental health counseling alum, we don't experience the same like role confusion in the environments of our workplace. But I am in the clinical mental health counseling field, and I know very little about the environment of addiction counseling. Can you tell me a little bit about that environment, what your role looks like? Are they accepting of certain theories, or just like Jolene was saying, she really believes in that social and emotional aspect of grades? So do you feel like you've been able to implement, what you feel is beneficial in addiction counseling in the environment that you work in?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I take into consideration with addictions counseling would be the stages of change model. The idea, and I think this is applicable to mental health too, and in specific change, that some clients are pre-contemplative, which is they're using or they're drinking, they have no intention of quitting. Then they move to contemplation, which is, they think maybe there's something going on, but I'm not ready to quit. And then it moves to preparation, which is just what it sounds like. You prepare to change, action, and then maintenance. And then you can add in kind of relapse as a stage of change in there if you want. I think incorporating that model into my day-to-day work is really, really important. Only because with how diverse our clientele is, again, working as a dual clinician, I have clients that are, mental health and addiction at the exact same time. Not every client is going to be on the same page with regards to willingness to change yet. So I find working with a lot of clients, confrontation might work pretty well with a client that's in the maintenance stage of addiction. That probably isn't going to go too well with someone who's pre-contemplative. I have a feeling if I were to confront someone pretty assertively who's pre-contemplative, they probably wouldn't come back for the next session. So it's kind of really meeting the client where they are and just kind of assessing where they are in their readiness for change. From an environmental standpoint, I think, also matching, and this is more of a health concern too, matching their addiction with the proper level of care. As a community mental health agency, we do non-intensive outpatient. We do a weekly group therapy for only substance use. But at the same time, if a client is actively using, that is in a dangerous situation, we do our best to really, really push inpatient treatment and to get connected with other agencies like, Nova, Access, Woodhaven, things like that. Because at the end of the day, if the substance use is so severe, I like to think that the benefit of counseling might be capped until they can get stabilized from a substance use standpoint. So, I think the agencies in our area work really well together from a level of care standpoint. But I'd say that's the biggest thing, is just assessing willingness to change. And again, even related to that, I think it speaks to the importance of establishing that therapeutic alliance with the client. Sometimes it can be a tough conversation to have when to kind of try to get the ball rolling on going to inpatient treatment, because not a lot of people want to just pick up their life and move to a treatment center for 30 days. So I think it speaks to the importance of maintaining that and creating that healthy therapeutic alliance right there, establishing that rapport.
Awesome, thank you. So switching gears to licensure exams. This was another hot topic that was requested. Jenna, I think Rebecca Kolsak at some point told me that you were getting up at 5 a.m. every morning to study. Can you tell me just a little bit about your experience with the exam? Did you feel prepared? What did you use for the NCE? How did that go for you?
Okay, so disclaimer, one of the reasons I had to get up so early, so I worked full, the part-time position for graduate assistantship. My site required like 24 to 30 hours a week. I had another part-time in classes, of course. So that last semester, I think I was averaging like a 72-hour work week. It was insane. But I survived, and that's the beauty of it. And I'm a morning person. I'll throw that out there too. So don't get up at 5 in the morning unless you can function at 5 in the morning would be my best advice. But yeah, so as far as studying for the NCE, I used the Purple Book, which was like, the mental health Bible when it comes to the NCE studying. So I did go through that. I'm big on, you have to study in a way that works for you. So I'm really big on like writing it down again. So I would kind of take the questions and put them into my own kind of outlines and templates. There was another student that used to work in the office named Sam who shared with me several different apps that she had downloaded that had a lot of like the test questions, like just practice questions. And to be honest, a lot of the apps that I used, I did feel like had a very accurate depiction of what the test actually ended up being. So I would be happy to send those to you at some point so you could share that with the department, because I found those,
Awesome.
yeah, that they were extremely helpful. And yeah, so I mean, I studied lightly. I started studying maybe 6 months in advance. I would say that last month is where I was like getting up very early. I mean, I just ate, slept, and breathed to the NCE exam for probably at least like 3 weeks leading up to it, and had no issues passing. But I think it just depends, you know, on your level of test anxiety. And again, you know, you just have to study in a way that matches your personal style. So give yourself time, breathe. It's going to be all right. That's what I tell all my friends that are still in the program.
Thanks. That's great advice that I will take too. Tasha, what was your experiencing getting licensed?
Yeah, so similar to what Jana was saying, I didn't study as intensely as that because I don't think our exam is as challenging as the national counseling exam. But we, as school counselors, we take the Ohio Assessment for Educators, the school counselor version. And so one of my classmates during internship year lent me a book that she had found. It's called like the Secret Study Guide or something like that for the OAE school counselor book. Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah. So that was basically my holy grail for a couple weeks as I got ready for the OAE. I also used a book called The School Counselor's Book of Lists, which is really interesting just as a school counseling book in general, but it covered a lot of material from ASCA. So that was very helpful as well, just to kind of go through that and pull things out that seemed like would be helpful to study. But my actual personal experience with the exam was pretty terrible, to be honest. I did pass it the first time, but when I went to my testing site, it was like a public site, and it was an online test. And the entire time, people were coming in and out, and like the person who was directing the test for the other people was like talking to them right next to me, and there was like all these noises. It was a very distracting testing environment. Definitely not. I was not at my like highest level of testing ability because of that. So so I would advise like maybe bring some earplugs with you if you go into a similar environment like that. And if you can't use them, you can't use them, but at least you have them if you can. So
I think even just mentally being prepared for the possibility that there's going to be distractions
yeah,
instead of
exactly.
walking in and being blindsided when you had an expectation that wasn't met.
Right. And I was expecting a similar environment to like when we do ACT testing at school, you know, where you're in a quiet room and you can focus, and it was not that at all. It was very brought my anxiety up to another level. So yeah, the one benefit of that test though is that you can get your pass fail results right at the end of the test. So you know pretty quickly whether or not you pass, which is a good thing.
Alan, you had to take the NCE, I think. Were there any other licensure exams? I am very naive to the world of chemical dependency. So what was your experience like?
Yeah, so in addition to the NCE, I think in order to get the LICDC, the Licensed Independent Chemical Dependency Counselor, it's a mouthful, license, you have to take, I don't know the specific name of it. I think it's called like the Alcohol and Drug Exam. I think it's what it's called. The process is essentially the same as the NCE. You sign up for it online. Again, like what Tasha said, you get the results right then and there. But I think it just covers obviously a whole lot about the addiction field. Mainly, levels of care, models of addiction theories. I think there's a lot of, understanding. There wasn't too much of the biological aspects of it, but knowing what drug does what essentially, and how a client might respond when using something as opposed to something else. So I think that one, again, it wasn't too hard. Again, just like what everyone else has been saying before, you studied a couple months before. At least in my experience, I kind of like picked up as I got closer to the exam date. But the biggest thing, I like to keep things constant. I stick to schedules. I made sure that I think I took it on a Saturday. I made sure that Friday I got a good night's sleep, ate a good breakfast, ate a good dinner the night before, and just kind of kept that routine going. I didn't really do anything differently with regards to that day. And then I know for rehabilitation counseling, to get that certification, I took the CRC exam. And I wish I knew which textbook I used or which study guide I used, but I think Dr. Huber would have that for you. It's whatever the recommended text is. And I used that one to study for that one. And again, not to reinvent the wheel, but it was essentially just like every other exam. You study for it, you take it online in one of those rooms, and you get the result right there. So it wasn't much like anyone else, or it wasn't any different than what anyone else has been saying so far.
Thank you. Well, part of being a licensed counselor is continuing to have your license. Kathy, I would love to hear some input on continuing education that you have found beneficial in your practice, certain like certifications or trainings that you feel would be a benefit to the majority of us. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I've been out here, so I've had to renew several times. I've been out here in the field. I know it's very easy right now to do CEUs online. There's something different you get when you do it in person. They're more expensive, I understand that, but it's worth it. It really is. It's worth taking the time, just connecting, going to the place, being in the room with a bunch of other professionals, and really being able to soak up the experience. I've done the online trainings, and the material just doesn't stick as well. So I would recommend that. One that for community counseling that's really good that I think doesn't often get a lot of attention is Heisel and Associates. They tend to have some pretty good trainings locally, and they're not so big that they're incredibly expensive. They're not like a PESI training. Not that PESI isn't good as well. I think that there's a way that you can have some fun with your training. So like go to a training and you know, one that's out of town a little bit, Cincinnati, Columbus, you know, stay in a hotel, make it some self-care time, take some time for yourself, disconnect from work, go to the training. It's still productive, you know, all of those things. You know, and go with the attitude of I want to be engaged. I want to participate.
Awesome. Thank you. So our final topic before we get into a brief Q&A with our CSI members is telehealth. So, you know, as we've moved through our education, there hasn't really been much as far as training in telehealth. And Kathy, since I have you, will you chat a little bit about what that's looked like in a private practice and any advice as we maybe are moving more to a telehealth model continuing forward?
It's definitely, yeah, learn as you go for sure. I mean, I never had telehealth training. That was not a thing. When I first started in the field, that just was not an option. It's been a huge blessing for many of my clients to be able to not have to leave their house and not have to worry about it. Certainly there are issues that come up. I do a lot of postpartum work. So, you know, I have kids popping into, you know, the windows, you know, they want to say hi to Miss Kathy and mommy's trying to talk about hard stuff. But learning how to roll with that and telling the client, that's okay. Do what you need to do. Do what you need to do. If you need to stop and get somebody a sippy cup of milk, go for it. And being patient with that as opposed to being frustrated that they're not able to attend. They're doing the best they can do. Having backup technology. So audio is not working. What am I going to do? Oh gosh, my video is not working. What am I going to do? Can I go to the phone? Will insurances pay for a phone consult if I'm having technical difficulties? So knowing what those plans are, you know, while you're doing the session, that would be my biggest advice.
Awesome, thank you. Jolene, have you had to move to more of a telehealth model in Dayton schools? Yeah, Jolene, sorry.
I just want to make sure. God, our kids haven't been in school for a year.
Okay.
So yeah, we were working from home from March until really the end of the school year last year. Um, so everything was kind of over the computer, which is really hard for the kids because there was no transition piece. They just went home one day and that was it. So for me, I had already been using a lot of technology because I do like my monthly guidance lessons and things like that. So all my kids are in my Google Classroom. So I would just do weekly like check-in forms and do appointments and try to do that kind of stuff with the kids. So it definitely moved to telehealth. So it's really it's difficult in a school setting doing it because you're used to kids just nonstop in your office coming to see you. And now it's kind of like you're hounding them like, okay, you say you want to talk, but like you're not logging on, like you still got to do that. Yeah, so we've switched. We do a lot of things through Zoom and Google Meet. Those are our two main platforms with Dayton. But yeah, everything's been online. The kids actually come back on Monday. So that'll be nerve-wracking to see them after a year.
So another transition.
Yes, another transition.
Tasha, how was that for you? You mentioned that you had just entered the field and were there for a hot minute before everything shut down. So what's that looked like at the STEM school?
Yeah, so it's been pretty crazy. A kind of a different experience from Jolene's because we've been kind of fluctuating in and out of hybrid and virtual. As like cases have gone up, we've switched to virtual. So we've for the most part had kids in the building since I would say about September or October. Some kids, not the full grade level. So it's kind of difficult managing having half of your caseload in person and half of your caseload virtual and trying to have equitable services between both of them. And then also having, kids pulled for quarantine and then now we're switching to virtual. And so it's like there's this constant need for flexibility. So that's really been the biggest challenge. And like Jolene mentioned, it's so hard when a kid needs to talk to you or you need to talk to the kid because they're having some kind of issue and you can't get them to respond to your email or you can't get them to like log onto your Zoom link. It's the worst. And I honestly don't have like a solution except for just to keep trying. So yeah, it's been a pretty crazy ride. I'm ready to get back to some normalcy, as I can imagine all of you also are. So yeah.
Thank you. Alan, in the chemical dependency world, what has this looked like for you? From telehealth to, and it looks like an increase of substance use in a lot of areas. How have you been handling all of it?
Yeah, I mean, telehealth it's kind of been a double-edged sword. It's a blessing in that it eliminates the barrier that a lot of clients have. Transportation is the first thing that comes to mind, and it does create challenges. However, when for me as well, trying to limit distractions when I work from home, that's definitely something I have to pay attention to. But also on the client side as well, it's a challenge to incorporate the technology to work in the field. Like I said, it's a double-edged sword, I think. But I think at our agency, we use GoToMeeting, but more often than not, I just end up using the phone. I've tried GoToMeeting with a lot of clients, and it just either a client doesn't have a smartphone or they don't have a phone in general. So I think the next step we do is, especially for maybe higher need clients, higher level of care clients, trying to get them into the office. And we have a great team of case managers that are able to provide transportation to make that happen. So it's kind of figuring out where the clients would be best served, whether we can do it over the phone or work with them in the office. And again, I give a huge shout out to our case managers that can transport during these difficult times. Because like you said, I mean, the statistics are there, overdoses and drug uses, increasing because of this pandemic. And from a client perspective, I like to almost offer a challenge to come into the office. I know, again, from a dual diagnosis perspective, with depression, that urge to isolate is huge. And you throw on a pandemic, and it's even harder to navigate that. So, I like to think of coming into the office, navigating those barriers. It's a huge opportunity to really give the client kudos for successfully making a trip into the office to see me. But no, it's absolutely a challenge, and it offers more accessibility via phone for a lot of clients.
Thank you. All right, so our CSI members who are in attendance, we have about 10 minutes left. So if you have any questions for a specific panelist or general questions, you can enter them into the chat box and I will share them. While they're potentially thinking of questions, I would love for each of you to just share one piece of parting advice. So whoever would like to share first, and if I get a question, I'll pop in between y'all. Any takers?
I'll go first.
Okay, great.
I think mine would be just to be gentle and patient with yourself in your first year, because you can set yourself up with a lot of pressure to be a perfect counselor in your first year. And the reality is that you still have lots to learn, and that's okay. So just keep that in mind. Try not to be too hard on yourself as things happen that you might look back on. You're like, oh crap, I could have done that differently. Well, yeah, that's how you learn, right? So just keep that in mind. And imposter syndrome is a real thing. If you don't know what it is, I'm sure you all do, but if you don't know what it is, look it up. It's very validating, and all of us go through it. So just hang in there. It'll get better.
We have a question from Dr. Hill. What is one thing you wish you would have learned in grad school but didn't?
Insurance information, billing code.
I'll second that.
How does that affect a client? Yeah, it's a big thing to tackle, and as newbies out in the field, know that the rest of us are still learning as well. You will catch on, I promise.
Thank you, Kathy. Any parting advice while you're there?
I would say know that you're not going to feel confident for a long time, and that's okay, and that's very normal. It's going to take years. You're going to sit in that chair and you're going to think, what am I doing here? How is this even possible? Totally normal. It takes a long time to get to the place where you feel legit. Totally normal. You'll be okay.
Thank you.
I was going to say, for me, I think one thing that I was going to say more parting advice, but I guess something I wish I would have known too is for school counselors, really getting to know your community and getting to know your staff was one of the biggest things. I think, Tasha had already kind of touched on advocating is a big piece in our profession in general. But in a school setting, one thing I really learned is even being new, people don't know your face. So just making yourself known to the staff. So you can find them on Teacher Pay Teacher, the little handouts, what does a counselor do? And kind of going over what your role is. And just doing it in a way that you're like, hey guys, I just want to help you out. These are some things that I can do. And just letting them know, because they may not really know what you do. Teachers may just get aggravated that, well, the kids are going to see the counselor again. They don't know that you're really trying to help them to do better in their class or help with their behaviors and things like that. But I think for me, really being visible for the staff, letting them know who you are, what is a school counselor, and then just making sure you're out and about as much as possible. Go to the kids' games, really get to know your community so they know who you are too. And then become friends with your secretary. That's my one piece of advice.
Some good solid advice. Alan, any parting advice or something you wish you would have learned in grad school?
I second the insurance thing wholeheartedly. That was, I always struggle with those questions because I think Wright State did such a good job of preparing me for the field, and yet I feel like we can never learn too much about the insurance side, the billing side of things. So I wholeheartedly agree with that one. As far as parting advice, it's kind of two-part, I'd say. First things first, ask questions. Again, when I entered the field, I was fortunate enough to get in at, when I worked for the hospital with staff, colleagues that had been in the field for like 25, 30, 35, even I think there's someone there with 40 years of experience. And it was, at least from my perspective, again, that was pretty, I kind of had this moment of like, what am I doing here? That all these people have been in this field forever. And so I think for me to just kind of be a sponge for a little bit, ask questions, get to know everyone's style, how they work with clients, what they would do in a particular situation. I think we preach an eclectic model in which we use a variety of different treatment modalities, and I think the best way to get that knowledge is, talking with other therapists, other clinicians. So I'd say that's the biggest thing from like a day-to-day perspective, and I'd say don't ever stop asking questions. If you're unsure about something, ask up. I ask other clinicians questions every day, and it helps. I'd say number two, and I think this is a given during a pandemic, prioritize self-care. I've heard countless people today say that they have furry little friends with them. I think part of me is again, I like schedules. I think when I get home from work each day, I take my dog on a long walk. I'm a huge advocate of activity, physical exercise as a way to kind of just unwind at the end of a tough day. So finding time for yourself, because the field, it can be stressful. There are going to be days that are harder than others. I mean, I think that's true for any job. But that saying that everyone else has, you can't take care of anyone else unless you're taking care of yourself. So, never a bad time to practice self-care. So I think that's the biggest stuff that I like.
Well, I think that pretty much does it for our afternoon, or I guess evening now. Thank you guys again so much. I feel like the words don't even express how grateful that I am. This was a big vision that our executive board had, was to really formulate some connection in this weird virtual world. And I know that we're all a little tired of online meetings. So I really appreciate the sacrifice for you being here, sharing some good wisdom. So yeah, Dr. Francis, do you have any closing remarks or?
No, I just echo that. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful weekend. Hang in there for the remainder of this COVID. Thank you for all that you do. And it's awesome seeing everyone and hearing their voices.
Great. Thank you guys again so much. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and happy spring break to the Wright State students.